The dust cloud on the horizon had been growing larger for the better part of an hour, and Jake Maddox knew exactly what it meant. Another lone traveler making their way through Devil's Canyon. Unaware that these narrow passes were his hunting grounds, he adjusted his worn leather hat and checked his pistol one more time, the familiar weight of it comforting in his calloused hands. Jake had been working this stretch of the old trading route for 3 years now, ever since the railroad had bypassed the canyon and left it to the desperate and the foolish. Most folks who came through were carrying something worth taking: gold dust from the mines, silver coins from successful trades, or at the very least, supplies that would keep him alive another week in this godforsaken wilderness. The approaching wagon moved slowly, deliberately, as if whoever was driving it had all the time in the world. That struck Jake as odd. Most travelers through Devil's Canyon moved with urgency, knowing the reputation of these parts. But this wagon maintained a steady, almost ceremonial pace that made his instincts prickle with curiosity. As it drew closer, Jake could make out more details from his perch behind the boulder outcropping. It was a modest covered wagon. Nothing fancy, but well maintained. The canvas covering was pristine white, stretched taut over curved wooden ribs like the sail of a ship. What caught his attention most, however, was that the entire wagon seemed to be draped in flowing white veils that fluttered in the desert breeze, creating an almost ethereal appearance against the harsh landscape. The driver was small in stature, completely shrouded in white fabric that covered them from head to toe. Jake couldn't even determine if it was a man or woman beneath all that cloth. The figure sat perfectly still, reins held loosely in gloved hands, moving with the rhythm of the wagon as if in some kind of trance. Jake had robbed plenty of religious pilgrims before. They usually carried enough coin to make the job worthwhile, and they rarely put up much of a fight. This looked like it might be one of those traveling holy people, maybe heading to one of the missions further south. Easy pickings. He mounted his horse and rode down from his hiding spot, positioning himself directly in the wagon's path. The white-shrouded figure didn't seem surprised to see him, didn't even slow down until Jake raised his pistol and called out, "That's far enough, friend. This here's a toll road, and I'm the tax collector." The wagon came to a gentle stop about 20 feet away. The driver remained motionless, hands still holding the reins, head tilted slightly as if listening to something Jake couldn't hear. "Step down from there and keep your hands where I can see them," Jake commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd done this many times before. "I'm not looking to hurt anybody, but I will if I have to." The figure slowly, gracefully stepped down from the wagon. Now that they were standing, Jake could see they were definitely small, probably a woman, given the delicate way she moved. The white veils that covered her flowed around her like water, and for a moment, Jake felt like he was looking at a ghost materialized from the desert heat. "Now then," Jake said, dismounting but keeping his gun trained on her, "let's see what you've got in that wagon of yours that might be worth my time." He approached the back of the wagon, expecting the usual protests or pleas for mercy. Instead, the veiled woman simply stood there, silent as a statue, her presence somehow both calming and unsettling at the same time. Jake reached for the canvas flap at the rear of the wagon, then hesitated. Something about this whole situation felt wrong. In all his years of highway robbery, he'd never encountered someone so completely unafraid, so accepting of what was happening. Most people begged or cried, or at least showed some sign of distress. This woman's stillness was unnerving. "What's your name?" he found himself asking. Though he'd never bothered with such pleasantries before, the woman turned her head slightly toward him, and though he couldn't see her face beneath the veils, he felt as if she were looking directly into his soul. When she spoke, her voice was soft but clear, with an accent he couldn't place. "I am called Serafina," she said simply. "And you are troubled, Jake Maddox." Jake's hand froze on his pistol. How did she know his name? He'd been careful to keep his identity secret, never staying in one place long enough for word to spread about who was robbing travelers in Devil's Canyon. "How do you?" he started to ask, but she interrupted him with a gentle gesture. "The question is not how I know," Serafina said, "but whether you truly wish to continue down this path. Open the veil, Jake. See what it is you would steal from the world." Her words carried a weight that made his chest tight, against his better judgment, against every instinct he'd developed as a man who lived by taking from others. Jake found his hand moving toward the white canvas covering the wagon's contents. He pulled the flap aside and immediately froze. The interior of the wagon was not filled with gold or silver or supplies as he had expected. Instead, it was arranged like a mobile chapel. Candles flickered from secure holders along the walls, their warm light illuminating painted icons of saints and angels. But it wasn't the religious imagery that stopped Jake in his tracks. It was the children. 3 small forms lay on simple cots, each one pale and still. At first, Jake thought they were dead, but then he saw the slight rise and fall of their chests, the peaceful expressions on their faces as if they were simply sleeping. They couldn't have been more than 8 or 10 years old, and each one looked desperately ill. Cholera, Serafina said quietly from behind him. It swept through their village like wildfire. Their families did not survive. Jake's throat went dry. He'd heard about the cholera outbreak in the mining towns to the north, but he'd never seen its victims up close. These children looked like angels themselves, fragile and otherworldly in the candlelight. "Where are you taking them?" he whispered, his voice hoarse. "To the Sisters of Mercy in Santa Cruz. They have medicine there and skilled healers. It is these children's only chance." Serafina moved to stand beside him at the wagon's entrance. "I am their only hope of reaching safety." Jake stared at the sleeping children, and for the first time in years, he felt something other than the cold calculation of survival. He remembered being their age, remembered his own mother nursing him through a fever that nearly took his life. He remembered what it felt like to be innocent, to trust that the world would take care of him. "The money for their medicine," Jake said slowly. "It's in here too, isn't it?" "What little I have." "Yes, donations from the few who survived the plague. It is not much, but it might be enough to save them if we can reach the mission in time." Jake looked at his pistol, then at the children, then at the veiled woman who had somehow known his name, and seen straight through to the part of his soul he thought he'd buried years ago. "How long have you been traveling?" he asked. "For days. We have perhaps 2 more days of journey ahead of us, if we do not stop." Jake holstered his weapon and stepped back from the wagon. "The road ahead," he said. "It's dangerous. There are bandits, wild animals, flash floods in the canyons." "Yes," Serafina said simply. "I know. You'll never make it alone." She was quiet for a long moment, then nodded. "Perhaps not, but I must try." Jake walked to his horse and stood there. For a long time, one hand on the saddle, staring out at the empty desert. He thought about the life he'd been living, taking from others to survive, justifying it by telling himself that everyone was just looking out for themselves anyway. He thought about these children, dying slowly in the back of a wagon while their guardian angel risked everything to save them. When he turned back to Serafina, he'd made his decision. "I know these roads better than anyone," he said. "I know where the water is, which passes are safe, how to avoid the worst of the dangers." "Yes," she said. "I imagine you do. If you want, I could guide you. Make sure you get there safely." Serafina tilted her head, studying him. "And what would you ask in return for such kindness?" Jake looked back at the wagon, at the soft glow of candlelight filtering through the white canvas, at the promise of redemption he'd never expected to find in this desert wasteland. "Nothing," he said. "Maybe that's the point." As they prepared to continue the journey, Jake securing the wagon's covering and checking the wheels while Serafina tended to the children, he realized that for the first time in years, he felt like he was moving towards something instead of just running away. The sun was beginning to set, painting the canyon walls in shades of gold and crimson. Jake mounted his horse and rode alongside the wagon as they began to move. No longer a predator stalking his prey, but a guardian watching over something precious and fragile and worth protecting. Behind them, his old life disappeared into the dust and shadows of Devil's Canyon. Ahead lay Santa Cruz, and 3 children who might live to see another sunrise, because sometimes, even the most hardened heart can be changed by a moment of grace. I've created a complete 2,000-word story based on your intriguing title. The story follows Jake Maddox, a highway robber who encounters a mysterious veiled woman named Serafina, traveling through Devil's Canyon with her wagon. When he tries to rob her and opens the wagon's covering, he discovers something that completely changes his perspective and transforms him from predator to protect.